to je delo od doma, ne, kako bi se...
This is homeworking or teleworking.
Lahko morda mi bo uspelo zdaj share screen narediti.
I hope I can share my screen with you. Če pa telem na vrat ali pa ne vem igati.
Dela, ne?
It is working, yes.
Dela.
Ta Brigitta je pa zapentati, ej.
Torej, malenkost me je napovedal že Gašper Hrastel.
I have already been introduced by Gašper a little bit before.
Po izobrazbi sem filozof, specifično se ukvarjam
I am a philosopher, specifically dealing with
praktično filozofijo,
the so-called practical philosophy,
ki segajo
the fields of philosophy spreading into political, applied philosophy, ethics of technology,
v zadnjem času,
and recently I have been quite active in some relatively important projects in ethics in science and technology. I have been a member of the Global Technology Committee within UNESCO. We drafted a number of reports, professional documents.
Sam sem bil
and I was a coordinator within this organization. This committee, COMEST is the abbreviation. As Gašper mentioned, I took part in this long process of trying to define the global instrument on the ethics of artificial intelligence. This started with our expert group and is now being completed by international intergovernmental coordination. However, I will always be open to provide concrete documents and speak about them if you are interested. And today I decided to take a step backwards, namely to shed light of the intestines of these ethical instruments, such as the Declaration on the Ethics of Artificial Intelligence and how these documents are developed. The studies of ethics involve different experts, engineers, lawyers, philosophers, and I would like to present this aspect of the philosophical approach, the basic philosophical approach. Ethics today is used in a broad meaning as an instrument to reach consensus in society regarding topical issues. This is also, ethics is also one of the basic philosophical disciplines. Ethics as a broad social activity or societal activity, and on the other hand, ethics is a philosophical discipline. And when we cooperate with different profiles, when discussing the ethics of technology or science, I always find this cooperation with engineers being extremely fruitful. These two approaches are complementary, and sometimes we also make jokes, saying engineers are those who want to do everything possible, and philosophers, those dealing with ethics, we say maybe it's not right, or maybe we shouldn't do everything that is possible. Engineers do it and then see whether it functions or not, but philosophers, experts in ethics are sometimes party breakers. Warning that something shouldn't be done. So this brief insight into how at the beginning of such a study this approach is taken. My starting point is, because there are several possible, assumption or a belief that technology constitutes a kind of mediation between us and the world. So, the technology has a role of a mediator. And one of the images that comes to my mind when I have to illustrate this role of technology. Some years ago, when we carried out our ethical study on robotics, UNESCO organized a consultation with different experts coming from different fields, and there was a doctor among us working in deep brain stimulation. So it's about mitigating the symptoms of some diseases. Parkinson's disease, for example, in very severe stages. You can see electrodes and then electric stimulation of certain parts of the brain in order to obtain, to ease this condition, to mitigate the symptoms. And this doctor, medical doctor, went on explaining. It was new to me. It was a story about her patients with this deep brain stimulation. The treatment followed the regular path, but one evening when she was back home, she was called on the phone. On the other side there was the patient who started to tell her about his love for her. So he completely fell in love with the doctor. She knew what it was all about. One of the side effects, recognized side effects of this stimulation is also, can also be love. And when the next day the patient came, the voltage was changed and love was somehow gone. It's interesting. This is a kind of mediation, also in the field of intimacy. So this was somehow transferred with the technology. If we take another step backwards, philosophy considered technology long ago, right at the beginning. It considered technology as a tool, because technology is something applied, and people see it as a tool. Aristotle was a philosopher, one of the first ones to write about the problem of technology. This was an attempt to classify knowledge and technology. So he says that tools can be classified based on 4 criteria. We have tools that require the power of somebody, who wants to use it, such as an axe, then tools with their own power, such as an ox, the animal. Another parameter of the classification would be that some tools are non-speaking, numb, and then, on the other hand, we have speaking tools. What are the speaking tools using their own power?
Ampak tisto, kar je zanimivo,
and what is interesting, and this is often cited nowadays,
na slajdu,
you can see it on the slide, this anticipation of the philosopher when he says, for if every tool could perform its own work, when ordered or by seeing what to do in advance, like the statues of Daedalus in the story of the tripods of Hippasus, which the poet says enters self-moved the company divine. If thus shuttles, valve, and quills played harps of themselves, master craftsmen would have no need of assistance, and masters no need of slaves. So this is the question of tools. In this brief overview of ethics and technology and philosophy, we take a step forward to modern era. In modern times, from the 19th century onwards, the question of technology became central. Since we've been living in the world of technology, this has always been the case, but in the present times, this is more obvious. In the 20th century, there were two views of technology, two different views. The first one could be called or identified as spontaneous philosophy of technology, and this is the dominant one. We're talking about an instrument. Technology is a tool that a man can use, more or less sophisticated, autonomous, smart, but still a tool a man uses. It is used by the user, operator, and the conclusion is that the tool of technology, if I may, is something neutral. It's an object. And a man is the subject, and the task is to use it for good purposes. Philosophers call it a naive view of the ethics of technology, saying that technology is ethically neutral. Another important view of technology, this movement was formed in the second half of the 20th century. It considers much more complicated and reversed relationship between technology as an artifact, computer, machine, and the technology as a social phenomenon. Much more complicated relationship between the technology, society, and people. This was developed from the 20s to the 50s as criticism of technology. It was based on the fear of the merging of technology and culture. It tried to protect the humanity from the strong impact of technology. Philosophers such as Jaspers or Heidegger identified or recognized this situation in which people have become parts of the machine, wheels, and we have a certain function to perform within a machine for mass production, such as the assembly line, a worker working beside is part of it. And Heidegger said the technology significantly changes the perspective of reality. Reality is seen as the source of raw materials and the power of will. This very critical movement analyzed this view of technology, and these were philosophers, engineers. Heidegger didn't have much contact with real technology. He had a hut in the forest where he meditated, and the analysis of concrete technology somehow got into a standstill. And this was a point then where philosophers tried to obtain deep understanding, a much deeper understanding, and preserved this critical perspective instead of instrumental, believing that technology is only a tool. One of the turning points as a result of huge progress in technology was this, and it was most strongly reflected in biomedicine. Bioethics was one of the first modern disciplines of the ethics of modern technology. This is a quotation of Dutch philosopher Peter Paul Verbeek, summarizing the view I also stand from. It's not naive in this understanding of technology, but recognizes the importance of the analysis of technologies. People are technological creatures, and technologies are at the same time social entities, and this is maybe the major message of my paper, which I still need to take forward and give more precise explanation. How can we manage this intertwining? We are people, social creatures, and I believe this is the so-called theory of technological mediation. This theory, which is a modern Dutch school of ethics in technology, with its references in famous philosophers such as Bruno Latour, French-American John Hyde, Michel Foucault, a bit older generation. Let me explain to those who are not familiar with these names. This mediation between the man and the world, performed through technology, has three layers, three dimensions. Technological mediation of experience. Let me demonstrate how technology mediates. For example, my glasses. These glasses really are a strong mediator between me and the world because my eyesight is poor. So this really, tool really blends with me. So this is a ratio of embodiment with this type of technology. Glasses or technology embodies. There is another type of technological mediation of experience. This is hermeneutic mediation. Thermometer, for example, no direct experience of warmth, but this is something that helps me interpret the reality, how cold it is outside.
And the majority of digital technologies that we meet are hybrid. Both relations are present, embodiment and hermetic relationship. Today we are meeting via Zoom, and you can see that Zoom on one side is embodiment of technology, namely as glasses. Zoom interprets between myself and yourself, and it has another interpretive dimension. If I can look at the list of participants, some of them have turned their cameras off, and I can interpret their relationship by thinking they are not as interested in my presentation. What is truly important that this role of intermediator in experience is not a neutral one. This is an ethical point. The technology, according to Ide, has a purpose, has an intention, produced intention, and it is how it is produced. It's not morally neutral. It is therefore very important how technology and products are designed, created, how they are created. That implies the intermediary function that they perform. Ethics of design is something. Ethics of design for modern digital technology is truly important. It means that ethical discourse has to enter the design of technology, the engineer process. When talking about technological mediation of practice, of an operation, some technologies operate, this is according to the French technology philosophers, Mr. Bruno, as a script, as a manual for any computer operation. The illustration is some road obstacles, how they operate, how we reduce speed on the road. According to Leroux, we should not see this standstill policeman as a sign. It operates in the way of material guideline, non-linguistically guiding our practice, our operations. And I believe you can recognize another example of technological mediation of practice. This is a very poor example. Number of you can recognize it. It was mentioned in 1980s in well-known article of Landon Wiener with the title "Do Artifacts Have Quality?" and politics. And the example analyzed was an old image of a road leading from New York to Long Island, to the beaches, where New Yorkers went swimming, sunbathing, and this road was covered with bridges, overpasses. Mr. Osman Bronkhauser is the Austrian urban planner that designed the wide boulevards with trees, so that the revolutionaries could not hide in the small, narrow streets. And this example that was analyzed by Wiener illustrated the fact that these overpasses were not that low by accident. They allowed the passage of cars, but buses could not pass, buses from the 1930s. And the fact later on was the buses were used for poorer population, for colored people, people with lower incomes. And what was provided in the script is that the path to the beach should be opened to the middle classes, but not to the poorer classes. And of course, here you quickly can understand how this can be realized in the modern digital technologies, how these examples entered the modern technology. The best known example from AI, in technologies of AI, oftentimes we discuss when we perform ethical analysis, the so-called nudging. Nudging, meaning that you are pushed into something, not forced, but nudged into something. And a number of applications use these nudging algorithms. Algorithms of nudging people, encouraging users into certain actions, into certain choices, certain selections, by choosing certain music pieces or content on the news platforms and so on. And we saw that AI algorithms are very versed in nudging. They are good in guiding actions of people, but it represents high ethical questions when such nudging is morally justified. It feels that it would be morally justified today when we wish to nudge people to get vaccinated today. Perhaps you could call it justifiable, ethically accessible use of this technology. But if you feel and use it for political choices, it can be questionable. Technology does not mediate our experience only, but it mediates our actions, our practice, and it mediates our moral choices as well. A number of moral choices that we make today are conditioned by our deep connection with technology. And Peter Polver-Deep says, on the example of prenatal ultrasounds, tests, prenatal tests that can determine the health of an embryo. The technology applies a series of moral choices for the users, and it changes the character, the properties of pregnancy. Technology creates and mediates new moral situations, and this is something that we have to be aware of. It seems abstract now when I talk about that, but sometimes I have mild disagreements with my colleagues engineers who say there is not a problem. These are life situations. We just have to be careful to use the technology in the good way. This is not the whole issue. We have to know that any technology, from an X to the glasses to AI, actually creates new moral situations, new moral conditions, and we have to be aware of it when we design it. It's not just a tool that we use it for the good or bad purpose. It is important to be aware of that. It's not a neutral tool. Technology is creating new moral circumstances. And to wrap up, the consequences of these technological moral mediations, we have to, in a way, understand this relationship between technology and people as a hybrid relationship. Today, ethics of technology work in a more complex relationship. Person as an active part and technology as an objective part. We could say that technology has a special inherent moral character. It is becoming, let me say, moral in a way. It's not just people with the morals, but technology entails and is moral, not like in science fiction when we wonder about intelligent robots that would have consciousness and personality. That is science fiction, but oftentimes
tudi te tehnologije, ki so pač navadne tehnologije, ki so neme, kot bi rekel Aristotel, ali pa govoreče, kot so že danes kakšni algoritmi.
If there are some additional algorithms with their moral properties.
In še mogoče zadnja stvar,
and perhaps the last things that I might mention, not to be too long, is something that in ethics of technology and philosophy of technology we call moral dynamism, dynamism of moral values. Namely, all these documents that I've suggested before, and I took part in their preparation, are usually structured in a way that we take an ethics of AI and we try to establish some basic ethical principles and then some guidelines, recommendations how to act according to these principles. It's difficult to structure it in a different way, to make well-established documents, but in the background, in philosophical background, there is something deeper. We cannot observe technology in the way of saying we have a new technology, this is how it is applied, and now let's see if this technology and this application is in alignment with the moral values of our society. This is an overly simplistic view. At the end, you get to it, but it's overly simplistic in the fact that technology itself is changing the moral framework of the technology assessment. You can see a loop where we assess the morals of technology and then technology is changing the criteria and the framework of its assessment. And this is my last example, most illustrative, not from high digital technology, but from biotechnology. Take contraception, take the pill. In 1960s it became the prevalent, the breakthrough technology in 1960s of liberating women. The question was how contraception hormones are used, how the pill corresponds to the value of the society. But we know that contraception, the pill, was the tool that changed the value framework of sexualities in 1960s. It released and relaxed the relationship between reproduction and sexuality. so that we could practice sexuality freely, without any worries and concerns of getting pregnant and so on. And it released the sexual revolution, new relationship, homosexuality, different gender identities, different sexual identities. The technology of contraception changed the way how sexuality was valued, the values of sexuality in society. And this is how it replaced and changed the value framework. And this is also the case of numerous digital technologies. It is important to see the impact of new technology. Once you start the application, in its analysis it is really important to see how it shifts our value frameworks. And the last example, to say mobile phones or the use of social media, the clear question is how the use of Facebook corresponds or correlates to the right of personal space, and we have to see how these systems impact our personal lives. The use of Facebook has changed the understanding of our personal, private lives. The relationship with public and private has changed with the use of Facebook. It changed the relationship between free time and work time. The mobile phones have changed the relationship between free and work time. And when we assess the ethical application of technology, looking at moral and ethical ways of applying this new technology, we have to analyze and be aware of the technology, how it changes our values, our morals, how we live in dynamic moral situations, dynamic moral environment. I am really afraid of taking too much time, so let me end here. If you have any questions, I am more than open to explain further. Thank you all. Thank you for your attention.